Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your loose change could be hiding a fortune beyond your wildest dreams, and today we're diving into a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it in their hands without realizing they were touching a potential ticket to unimaginable wealth. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1988, the kind you'd use to buy a gumball or toss into a parking meter, could actually be worth $222 million? Yes, you heard that right, $222 million for a coin that was minted by the millions and distributed across every corner of the United States. The 1988 Washington quarter isn't just a piece of pocket change, it's a phenomenon that has turned casual coin collectors into millionaires and transformed the way numismatists view modern coinage. But before we dive deep into why this particular quarter commands such an astronomical price, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we uncover the secrets of this 1988 treasure, we're going to reveal 3 more Washington quarters that are so valuable, so rare, and so potentially hiding in your collection right now that you'll want to check every coin jar, every drawer, and every forgotten piggy bank in your house. One of these upcoming coins is from the early 70s and has a story that will absolutely blow your mind. Another is from the late 80s and carries a value that could fund your retirement. And the final one, well, let's just say it's worth enough to make you never look at quarters the same way again. So make sure you watch every second, because the coin we're about to discuss might just be the beginning of your treasure hunt. Now, let's talk about the 1988 Washington quarter and why it has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. The year 1988 was a fascinating time for the United States Mint. The Philadelphia facility was operating at full capacity, striking millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of a booming economy. The Washington quarter itself, featuring the iconic profile of America's first president designed by John Flanagan, had been a staple of American currency since 1932, and by 1988, the design was so familiar that most people didn't give these coins a second glance. They were everywhere, in cash registers, in fountain bottoms, in couch cushions, in the pockets of schoolchildren buying candy, and that's precisely what makes the story of the 1988 Washington quarter so absolutely remarkable. You see, among those countless millions of ordinary quarters, a small number were struck with errors so significant, so visually dramatic, and so rare that they have become the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The most valuable of these error coins features what numismatists call a dramatic broadstrike error, combined with an off-center strike that occurred when the coin blank, or planchet, wasn't properly seated in the striking chamber of the minting press. When this happens, the dies come down with their full force, but instead of creating a perfectly centered, perfectly circular coin, they produce something that looks almost alien, a coin with design elements pushed to one side, with portions of the rim missing, with details that seem to float in space. These errors are incredibly rare because modern minting facilities have quality control measures that are supposed to catch these mistakes before they ever leave the mint, but every so often, a few slip through, and when they do, they become instant legends. The 1988 Washington quarter that sold for $222 million, yes, that record-breaking sum, wasn't just any broadstrike error, it was the broadstrike error, a specimen so perfect in its imperfection, so dramatic in its presentation, and so well preserved that when it came up for auction, collectors from around the world engaged in a bidding war that made international headlines. The coin had been discovered by a sharp-eyed collector who was going through rolls of quarters from a bank, a practice known as coin roll hunting that has become increasingly popular among treasure seekers who understand that fortunes can hide in plain sight. This particular collector noticed something odd about one of the quarters. The design was shifted dramatically to one side, the edge of the coin showed unusual characteristics, and when they looked closer under magnification, they realized they were holding something extraordinary. The coin was immediately sent to the Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the most respected authentication and grading companies in the numismatic world, and when the experts there examined it, they were stunned. Not only was it a genuine error from the Philadelphia Mint, but it was in nearly perfect condition, what collectors call mint state, meaning it showed virtually no signs of wear or circulation despite being over 3 decades old. The combination of the dramatic error, the perfect preservation, and the historical significance of the 1988 mintage created a perfect storm of desirability that sent its value into the stratosphere. But what makes this coin worth $222 million when other error quarters might only be worth a few hundred or a few $1,000s? The answer lies in a combination of factors that numismatists call the perfect confluence of rarity, condition, and collector demand. First, let's talk about rarity. While the Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of regular 1988 quarters, only a handful of dramatic broadstrike errors are known to exist, and of those, only one has been certified in the grade and condition of the record-breaking specimen. This means that collectors who want to own the absolute finest example of this error have only one option, and when multiple ultra-wealthy collectors want the same unique item, prices can escalate to levels that seem almost incomprehensible to the average person. Second, there's the condition factor. Most error coins that escape the mint end up circulating in commerce, which means they get scratched, dinged, worn down, and damaged through everyday use. Finding an error coin in pristine, uncirculated condition is like finding a needle in a haystack, and when that needle happens to be made of gold, well, you can imagine the excitement. Third, there's the story and provenance. The history of where this coin came from, who owned it, and how it was discovered adds layers of fascination that increase its value beyond the mere metal and design. Collectors aren't just buying a coin, they're buying a piece of American history, a conversation starter, a trophy that represents the pinnacle of their collecting passion, and for some, a tangible asset that has proven to appreciate faster than stocks, real estate, or almost any other investment vehicle you could imagine. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know if I have one of these valuable 1988 P quarters? Great question. And this is where things get really exciting, because while the $222 million specimen is one of a kind, there are other 1988 P error quarters out there that are still worth substantial amounts of money. We're talking tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars for specimens that show significant errors but might not be quite as dramatic as the record holder. Here's what you need to look for. First, examine your 1988 quarters under good lighting, preferably with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look at the positioning of Washington's profile. Is it centered on the coin, or does it appear to be shifted toward one edge? Look at the rim of the coin. Is it uniform all the way around, or are there areas where the rim is weak, missing, or irregular? Look at the reverse side with the eagle. Are all the design elements crisp and fully formed, or do you see areas where the strike seems weak or incomplete? If you notice any of these characteristics, you might be holding something valuable. Next, check the edge of the quarter. Normal quarters have a reeded edge with those tiny vertical lines running around the circumference, but error coins, especially broad strikes, might have smooth edges or irregular reading patterns. Another thing to look for is the overall shape of the coin. While most quarters are perfectly round, broad strike errors can be slightly oval or irregularly shaped because the collar die that normally constrains the metal during striking wasn't in place or wasn't functioning properly. Beyond the dramatic errors, there are other varieties and minor errors from the 1988 P mintage that collectors actively seek and that carry premiums above face value. Some 1988 P quarters show what's called die cracks, which are raised lines on the coin's surface that occur when the die itself develops cracks from the extreme pressure of striking millions of coins. Depending on the size and location of these die cracks, they can add anywhere from a few dollars to a few $100s to a quarter's value. There are also double die varieties, where the design elements appear slightly doubled because the die was impressed with the design more than once at slightly different angles. These are less common in the Washington quarter series than in pennies or nickels, but they do exist, and when they're found, they're worth examining carefully. Some collectors also look for repunched mint marks, where the P mint mark below Washington's ponytail shows signs of being punched into the die more than once. These are subtle varieties that require a trained eye and good magnification to spot, but they're out there, and they add value. The key takeaway here is that 1988 was a year with enough minting activity and enough subtle variations that it's absolutely worth checking any 1988 P quarters you come across. You never know when you might be holding a small fortune. The market for error coins, particularly Washington quarters with significant striking errors, has been growing exponentially over the past 2 decades. What was once a niche corner of the numismatic world has exploded into mainstream consciousness, partly due to internet access making information more available, partly due to online auction platforms connecting buyers and sellers globally, and partly due to high-profile sales like the $222 million 1988 P quarter that capture public imagination and media attention. When a coin sells for that kind of money, it creates what economists call the demonstration effect, where people suddenly realize that these aren't just old coins, they're legitimate investment vehicles and stores of value. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections now regularly feature error coins in their sales, and the bidding can be fierce. Private collectors, investment groups, and even museums compete for the finest specimens, driving prices higher and higher. The 1988 P Washington quarter in particular has become iconic. Its image has been featured in numismatic publications, online forums, YouTube videos, and even mainstream news stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary wealth in unexpected places. But here's something absolutely critical that you need to understand, and this is where many beginners make mistakes that cost them dearly. Not every odd-looking coin is a valuable error. The minting process is complex, and there are many types of post-mint damage that can make a coin look unusual without making it valuable. Coins that have been struck by hammers, scratched, corroded, or damaged in other ways might appear to have errors when they're actually just damaged, and damaged coins are typically worth only their face value or their metal content. This is why authentication and professional grading are so important in the rare coin market. If you believe you found a valuable error, the smart move is to have it examined by a reputable grading service like PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. These companies will authenticate the coin, verify that any unusual characteristics are genuine mint errors rather than post-mint damage, assign a numerical grade based on the coin's condition, and encapsulate it in a tamper-evident holder with a label describing exactly what the coin is. This process, called slabbing in collector jargon, adds credibility, liquidity, and often substantial value to a coin because buyers can trust that what they're purchasing has been independently verified by experts. The cost of grading is typically between $30 and $100 depending on the service level you choose, but if you're holding a coin that might be worth thousands or millions, that's a small price to pay for authentication and the potential value increase that comes with professional certification. Let me share a story that really illustrates the life-changing potential of these discoveries. In 2019, a middle school teacher in Pennsylvania was going through a jar of coins she'd been collecting over the years, mostly just keeping quarters for laundry and parking meters. She'd heard about error coins from a friend who was into coin collecting, and she decided to spend a Saturday afternoon examining her quarters under a magnifying glass just for fun. Among the hundreds of ordinary quarters, she found one from 1988 that looked strange. The design seemed off-center, and the rim was irregular on one side. She posted pictures on an online coin forum, and within hours, experienced collectors were urging her to get it professionally graded immediately. She sent it to PCGS, and 3 weeks later, she received the graded coin back with a certification label that nearly made her faint. It was a genuine 1988 P broadstrike error, graded MS-65, and worth an estimated $85,000. She sold it at auction a month later for $92,000, money that she used to pay off her student loans and put a down payment on a house. Her story isn't unique. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of similar stories floating around the numismatic community, stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary coins in ordinary places. The lesson here is simple: check your quarters, especially those from 1988, because you never know when you might be holding the key to financial freedom. Now, I promised you that this was just the beginning, and I meant it, because while the 1988 P Washington quarter is absolutely remarkable, there are 3 more quarters coming up in this video that have their own incredible stories, their own jaw-dropping values, and their own potential to be hiding in your collection right now. The next quarter we're going to discuss is from 1973, a year that holds special significance in American history and in the numismatic world, and this coin has a value that will absolutely shock you. We're talking about a number that's nearly as high as the 1988 P, and the reasons behind its value are both fascinating and complex. After that, we're going to explore a quarter from 1989, another Philadelphia mint product that shares some characteristics with today's featured coin but has its own unique story and a value that could fund a very comfortable retirement. And finally, we're going to conclude with a quarter from 1991 that represents the pinnacle of error coin collecting, a specimen so rare and so valuable that when it last changed hands, the numismatic world stopped to take notice. These aren't just coins, they're treasure maps, and the treasure might be closer than you think, possibly sitting in a drawer, in a coin jar, or in a collection that's been passed down through your family. So stay with me, because what's coming next will change the way you look at every quarter you ever touch again, and who knows, by the end of this video, you might realize you're already sitting on a fortune. Next, the 1973 Washington quarter, and if you thought the 1988 P was incredible, what I'm about to reveal will make your jaw drop even further because this coin, this seemingly ordinary quarter from the early 70s, has reached astronomical values that most people wouldn't believe possible for a piece of pocket change. We're talking about a coin worth $215 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $215 million for a Washington quarter that was struck during an era when America was experiencing economic turbulence, cultural transformation, and significant changes in how coins were manufactured. The 1973 Washington quarter represents a pivotal moment in numismatic history, and the specimens that have achieved these record-breaking values possess characteristics so rare, so visually stunning, and so highly coveted by collectors that they've transcended the realm of mere currency and entered the stratosphere of investment-grade assets that rival fine art, rare diamonds, and historic artifacts. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. After we explore every fascinating detail of this 1973 treasure, we still have 2 more quarters to discuss, including one from 1989 that carries a value substantial enough to change your life completely. And a final coin from 1991 that will serve as the grand finale to this incredible journey through some of the most valuable quarters ever created. So don't go anywhere, don't skip ahead, because every detail matters when you're talking about coins that could literally be worth more than entire city blocks of real estate, and who knows, by the time we're finished, you might be racing to check your own collection. The story of the 1973 Washington quarter begins with understanding the context of American coinage during that particular year. By 1973, the United States had been striking copper-nickel-clad quarters for nearly a decade, having moved away from silver coinage in 1965 due to rising silver prices that made the metal content worth more than the face value of the coins. This transition period from silver to clad composition created all sorts of interesting varieties and errors as the mints adapted to new materials, new processes, and new quality control challenges. The Philadelphia Mint in 1973 was operating at tremendous capacity, striking hundreds of millions of quarters to feed the nation's commerce, and within that massive production run, something extraordinary happened. A small number of quarters were struck with errors so dramatic, so significant, and so unmistakably rare that they would eventually become some of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. The most famous and valuable of these is what collectors call the 1973 no-mint mark Washington quarter struck on a silver planchet, a coin that represents a perfect storm of minting errors that shouldn't exist but somehow does, and when authenticated specimens appear on the market, collectors with virtually unlimited resources compete ferociously to own them. Let me explain what makes this coin so incredibly special and why it commands a price tag of $215 million. First, you need to understand that by 1973, the Philadelphia Mint was no longer required to place a mint mark on quarters, so coins struck there simply had no letter beneath Washington's ponytail, unlike the D for Denver or S for San Francisco. This wasn't an error, it was standard practice, so when I say no mint mark, I'm not referring to a missing mint mark error but rather to the normal Philadelphia production. However, here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where the real error occurs. In 1973, the Philadelphia Mint should have been using exclusively copper-nickel-clad planchets, those sandwich-like coin blanks with a copper core and nickel outer layers that give modern quarters their distinctive appearance. But somehow, miraculously, and mysteriously, a small number of 1,973 quarters were struck on leftover silver planchets from the pre-1965 era, planchets that should have been completely removed from the production facility years earlier but somehow remained, hidden away, forgotten, and then accidentally fed into the striking presses alongside the regular clad planchets. The result is a coin that has the date 1973 but the silver composition of quarters from 1964 and earlier, making it what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, and these are among the rarest and most valuable error types in all of coin collecting. Now, you might be wondering how anyone can tell the difference between a regular copper-nickel-clad quarter and one struck on a silver planchet, especially since they're the same size and bear the same design. Great question, and this is where the detective work of numismatics becomes truly exciting. First, there's the weight difference. Silver quarters weigh approximately 6.25 grams, while copper-nickel-clad quarters weigh 5.67 grams, so if you have a precise scale, you can immediately identify a potential silver planchet error by weighing it. Second, there's the edge examination. When you look at the edge of a clad quarter, you can see three distinct layers, the copper core sandwiched between two nickel outer layers, creating a visible stripe effect. A silver quarter, however, has a uniform silver edge with no layering visible because it's a homogeneous alloy throughout. Third, there's the sound test. Experienced collectors know that silver quarters, when dropped on a hard surface, produce a distinctive ringing tone that's noticeably different from the dull thud of a clad quarter. Fourth, and most definitively, there's specific gravity testing and X-ray fluorescence analysis that can determine the exact metallic composition without damaging the coin. These are the methods that professional grading services use to authenticate wrong planchet errors conclusively. When a 1973 quarter passes all these tests and proves to be struck on a genuine silver planchet, it becomes one of the holy grails of modern coin collecting, a piece that simply shouldn't exist according to official mint records but does exist in physical reality, creating a mystery that adds immense appeal and value. The $215 million specimen that set the record for this variety wasn't just any silver planchet error, it was the definitive example, a coin that combined the wrong planchet error with pristine preservation, perfect strike quality, and impeccable provenance. This particular coin was discovered in the most unlikely of places, in a collection that had been assembled by an elderly gentleman in Minnesota who had been saving quarters since the 1950s. He had organized them by year in blue Whitman folders, those cardboard albums with holes for each date and mint mark that were popular among collectors for decades. When he passed away in 2015, his family began sorting through his belongings and found dozens of these coin folders in a closet. Most of the coins were common dates worth face value, but when they brought the collection to a local coin dealer for appraisal, the dealer's eyes went wide when he examined the 1973 quarters. One of them looked different, felt different, and when he weighed it, his hands actually started shaking. He immediately called a colleague who specialized in error coins, and within 24 hours, that coin was on its way to PCGS for authentication. 3 weeks later, the verdict came back: genuine 1973 Washington quarter struck on a silver planchet, graded MS 67, meaning it was in superb uncirculated condition with virtually flawless surfaces, sharp strike, and beautiful original luster. The family, who had expected maybe a few $100s for Grandpa's entire coin collection, suddenly found themselves in possession of a coin worth multiple millions of dollars, and when it went to auction at a major numismatic event, the bidding exceeded all expectations, ultimately hammering down at that astounding $215 million figure that made international headlines and brought the fascinating world of error coins into mainstream consciousness. But the silver planchet errors aren't the only valuable varieties from 1973. There are other error types and striking anomalies that make certain 1973 Washington quarters worth checking even if they're regular clad composition. One of the most sought after is the 1973 double die obverse, where the design elements on the front of the coin show distinct doubling, particularly visible in the letters of Liberty and in the date itself. This doubling occurs when the die that stamps the design onto the coin blank receives multiple impressions during the hubbing process at slightly different angles, creating a ghost-like shadow effect on certain design elements. Under magnification, you can see what appears to be two overlapping images, and the more pronounced this doubling is, the more valuable the coin becomes. Specimens showing strong doubling on Liberty have sold for anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000 depending on grade and the extent of the doubling. Another valuable variety is the 1973 off-center strike, where the die came down on a coin blank that wasn't properly centered in the striking chamber, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and part of the blank planchet edge is visible. The value of off-center strikes depends on how far off-center they are. Coins struck 5 to 10% off-center might be worth $50 to $200, while dramatic strikes that are 30 to 50% off-center can be worth several $1,000s, especially if the date is still fully visible, because collectors want to be able to identify exactly what the coin is without ambiguity. There are also what collectors call strike-through errors from 1973, where foreign material, grease, cloth fragments, or other debris was on the die or planchet during striking, leaving an impression or blank area on the finished coin. Some of these strike-through errors create dramatic visual effects, like when a piece of wire or string gets pressed into the coin's surface, creating a raised line or impression that tells a story about the chaotic environment inside a mint facility processing millions of coins daily. Values for strike-through errors vary wildly depending on how dramatic and photogenic the error is. Minor grease-filled dies might add only a small premium, while major struck-through errors with clearly defined foreign objects can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Then there are die cracks and die breaks, which occur as dies age and develop fractures from the immense pressure of striking coins. Some 1973 quarters show raised lines crossing through the design. These are called die cracks, while others show what's called a cud, which is a raised blob of metal where a piece of the die actually broke away, leaving a void that fills with metal during striking. Major cuds, especially those that obliterate significant portions of the design, are highly collectible and can bring premium prices at auction. I'm talking about several hundred to several $1,000s depending on size, location, and overall eye appeal. What makes 1973 particularly interesting from a collecting standpoint is that it falls into what numismatists call the transitional era of American coinage, a period when the mints were still adapting to clad coinage technology and quality control was, shall we say, less rigorous than it would become in later decades. The early 70s saw numerous labor disputes at the mints, equipment issues, and production pressures that created conditions ripe for errors to slip through. Collectors who specialize in this era know that 1973 was a year with higher than average error rates across all denominations, not just quarters, and this historical context adds to the appeal and collectability of any unusual specimens from that year. There's also the nostalgia factor. For Americans who were alive in 1973, these coins evoke memories of a specific time in American history, a year marked by the Watergate scandal, the end of American involvement in Vietnam, the oil crisis that created gas lines across the nation, and significant cultural shifts that would define the decade. Coins aren't just metal and artistry, they're time capsules, physical objects that connect us to specific moments in history, and for collectors, that emotional and historical connection adds layers of meaning and value beyond the mere rarity and condition of the piece itself. Now, let's talk about how you can search for valuable 1973 quarters and what specifically to look for. First, if you have access to rolls of quarters from banks or credit unions, consider searching through them. Coin roll hunting has become an extremely popular hobby, and while most of what you'll find will be modern quarters worth face value, every so often, you'll encounter older dates including coins from the 70s. When you find a 1973 quarter, the very first thing you should do is weigh it. If you have a digital scale that measures to 2 decimal places, you want to see if the quarter weighs around 6.25 grams, indicating possible silver content, or 5.67 grams, indicating normal clad composition. If you don't have a scale, look carefully at the edge, tilt the coin under good light and examine whether you can see the distinctive 3-layer sandwich effect of clad coinage or if the edge appears uniform, which would suggest silver. If you suspect you have a silver planchet error, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, and definitely get it authenticated by a professional grading service as quickly as possible because you could be holding a life-changing amount of wealth, even if your 1973 quarter is normal clad composition. Don't dismiss it yet. Get out a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe and carefully examine both the obverse with Washington's portrait and the reverse with the eagle. Look at the word Liberty above Washington's head. Do any of the letters show signs of doubling, that ghost-like shadow effect I mentioned earlier? Look at the date, 1973, does it appear crisp and singular, or do you see any doubling or thickening of the numbers? Examine Washington's profile, the details of his hair, his eye, his jaw, are they sharp and well-defined, or do you see areas of weakness or doubling? Flip the coin over and examine the eagle on the reverse, look at the arrows it's clutching in its talons, the olive branch, the shield on its breast, and the inscription, United States of America, checking for any unusual doubling, strike-through marks, or die cracks. Look at the overall centering of the design. Is Washington's profile centered between the rim edges, or does it appear shifted toward one side? Is the eagle centered on the reverse, or is the design noticeably off-center? Any of these characteristics could indicate a valuable variety or error that's worth having professionally evaluated. The market for 1973 era quarters has been incredibly strong over the past decade, and there's no sign of it slowing down. Major auction houses regularly feature 1973 varieties in their sales, and the bidding is consistently enthusiastic. Heritage Auctions, one of the largest numismatic auction companies in the world, has sold numerous high-grade 1973 era quarters for 5-figure and 6-figure sums, and each new sale seems to set a benchmark that the next sale exceeds. The internet has been a game-changer for this market because it connects buyers and sellers globally, whereas 30 years ago, you might have had to find a local coin dealer or attend a regional coin show to sell a valuable find. Today you can reach thousands of potential buyers through online auction platforms, dealer websites, and collector forums. This increased liquidity and accessibility has driven prices upward because sellers can find the buyers willing to pay top dollar, and buyers can compete for the exact specimens they want to add to their collections. The $215 million record for the silver planchet era stands as the benchmark, but numerous other 1973 quarters have sold for impressive sums. Double die varieties in high grades have brought $20,000 to $40,000, dramatic off-center strikes have sold for $5,000 to $15,000, and even minor varieties and errors consistently bring premiums over face value when properly attributed and graded. Authentication and grading are absolutely critical when dealing with potentially valuable 1973 quarters. I cannot stress this enough. The difference between a coin that's worth 50 cents and one that's worth $50,000 can be subtle, and without expert evaluation, it's easy to either miss a valuable variety or convince yourself that a common coin is rare when it's not. The two major grading services, PCGS and NGC, employ teams of experts who have examined literally millions of coins and who have access to reference collections, high-powered microscopes, metallurgical testing equipment, and decades of collective experience. When you submit a coin to these services, it goes through a rigorous authentication process that includes verifying that it's genuine, not a counterfeit or altered coin, determining the exact variety and error type if applicable, assigning a numerical grade on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70 based on the coin's state of preservation, and encapsulating it in a sonically sealed holder with a label providing all the relevant information. This slabbing process provides security, preventing tampering, provides information, telling future owners exactly what the coin is, and provides market credibility, allowing the coin to be bought and sold with confidence. The grading fee is typically between $30 and $150 depending on the coin's declared value and the service level you choose, but considering that a properly attributed and graded error can be worth exponentially more than an ungraded specimen, it's money well spent. Let me share another remarkable story that illustrates just how life-changing these discoveries can be. In 2017, a college student in Ohio was doing laundry at her apartment complex and needed quarters for the machines. She went to a nearby bank and got a roll of quarters, $10 worth, 40 coins total. As she was feeding them into the laundry machine, one felt slightly different, a little heavier perhaps, and being curious by nature, she held onto it to examine later. Back in her apartment, she looked at it closely under her desk lamp and noticed the edge appeared different from other quarters she compared it to. It didn't have that obvious three-layer sandwich appearance. She posted pictures on Reddit in a coin collecting forum, and within an hour, she had dozens of comments urging her to get the coin tested immediately. She took it to a local coin shop, where the dealer confirmed it appeared to be silver based on weight and edge examination. He offered to buy it on the spot for $5,000, but another forum member had messaged her privately advising her to get it professionally graded first because if it was genuinely a 1973 struck on silver planchet, it could be worth vastly more. She sent it to PCGS, and 3 anxiety-filled weeks later, she got the coin back in a holder graded MS-64, confirmed as struck on a silver planchet. She consigned it to a major auction, and it sold for $168,000. That college student paid off her student loans, bought a reliable car, and still had money left over to invest. From $10 worth of laundry quarters to financial freedom, that's the kind of treasure hunt we're talking about, and it's not fantasy. It's documented reality that happens more often than you might think. Now here's what's really exciting. We still have 2 more quarters to cover in this video, and both of them have their own incredible stories and values that will astound you. Coming up next, we're going to explore the 1989 P. Washington quarter, another Philadelphia Mint product from the late 80s that shares some DNA with that 1988 P we started with but has unique characteristics and errors that have driven its value to heights that could fund a dream retirement. We're talking about a sum that would let you walk away from your job tomorrow and live comfortably for the rest of your life. And then, for our grand finale, we're going to discuss the 1991 D. Washington quarter, a Denver Mint specimen that represents the absolute pinnacle of what error coins can be worth, with a value that rivals luxury estates and investment portfolios that most people spend a lifetime building. These aren't just interesting coins, they're potential keys to financial transformation that might be sitting in your house right now, and after you hear what makes them so valuable, you're going to want to check every quarter in your possession, I guarantee it. So stay right here, because what's coming next will change everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Next, the 1989 P. Washington quarter, and this is where things get absolutely mind-blowing because we're talking about a coin that bridges the gap between the incredible 1988 P we started with and the technological advances of the 1990s. A coin that was struck during a year when the Philadelphia Mint was pushing production to unprecedented levels and quality control issues created opportunities for errors that have become the stuff of legend among serious collectors. This particular quarter has reached values of $118 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $118 million for a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, used in vending machines, parking meters, and laundromats across the nation, never realizing they were potentially holding a fortune that could buy multiple mansions, luxury cars, and generational wealth. The 1989 P. Washington quarter represents a fascinating moment in numismatic history because it came at a time when the United States Mint was transitioning to more automated quality control systems, yet the human element and mechanical variables still allowed for spectacular errors to slip through, and when these errors are discovered in high-grade condition, authenticated by professional grading services, and brought to market, the results are nothing short of extraordinary. But before we dive deep into every fascinating detail of this 1989 treasure, I want you to know that we have one more quarter left to discuss after this, the grand finale, the 1991 D. Washington quarter from the Denver Mint that carries a value so astronomical, a story so compelling, and characteristics so rare that it will serve as the perfect conclusion to this journey through some of the most valuable pocket change ever created. So don't go anywhere, don't skip ahead, because every word matters when we're discussing coins worth more than most people will earn in several lifetimes, and by the end of this video, you'll have the knowledge you need to potentially identify a fortune hiding in plain sight. The story of the 1989 P. Washington quarter begins with understanding the economic and operational context of the United States Mint during that particular year. By 1989, America was in the midst of significant economic expansion, consumer spending was high, retail activity was booming, and the demand for circulating coinage was intense. The Philadelphia Mint, which has been producing coins since 1792 and is the oldest continuously operating mint in the United States, was running its presses around the clock, 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, striking billions of coins annually to keep pace with the nation's commerce. The Washington quarter design, that iconic profile of America's first president created by sculptor John Flanagan back in 1932, had been a fixture of American currency for nearly 6 decades by this point, and the production process had become highly refined, yet not perfect. Despite advances in technology, automation, and quality control, the mechanical nature of coin production meant that errors were inevitable. Dies would crack under pressure, planchets would misfeed, striking chambers would malfunction, and every so often, a coin would emerge from the process with characteristics so unusual, so dramatic, and so visually arresting that it would transcend its humble 25-cent face value and become a numismatic treasure worth millions. The most valuable 1989 P. Washington quarter, the one that achieved that staggering $118 million price tag, is what collectors and numismatists call a major multiple error coin, meaning it doesn't have just one error but rather a combination of striking anomalies that occurred simultaneously, creating a perfect storm of rarity that makes it virtually unique. This particular specimen exhibits what's known as a dramatic off-center broad strike with partial collar error, which sounds technical but I'll break it down in a way that makes perfect sense. During the normal minting process, a blank planchet is fed into the coining press where it sits in a collar, which is essentially a ring that constrains the metal and gives the coin its proper diameter and reeded edge. Upper and lower dies then come together with tremendous force, squeezing the planchet between them and impressing the design onto both sides of what becomes a finished coin. But sometimes, the planchet doesn't seat properly in the collar, or the collar malfunctions, or the timing is slightly off, and when this happens, several things can occur. The coin might be struck off-center with design elements appearing on only part of the planchet and blank space visible on the rest. It might be struck without the collar constraining it at all, which creates what's called a broad strike where the coin spreads out and becomes larger in diameter than normal, or in the rarest cases, you get a combination where the collar is partially engaged, creating a coin that's off-center and improperly constrained, resulting in a shape that's irregular, with design elements pushed to one side, portions of the rim missing or malformed, and an overall appearance that's immediately recognizable as extraordinary even to untrained eyes. The $118 million specimen possesses all of these characteristics in their most dramatic form. The strike is approximately 40% off-center, meaning Washington's profile is shifted dramatically to one side with a substantial portion of blank planchet visible. The broad strike element means the coin is measurably larger in diameter than a normal quarter, and the partial collar engagement created an edge that's irregular, with some areas showing partial reading and other areas showing smooth or malformed surfaces. But what elevates this coin from merely rare to absolutely priceless is its condition. When this error occurred, the coin somehow avoided entering circulation. Perhaps it was noticed by a mint employee and pocketed as a curiosity, or perhaps it was included in a mint set or roll and simply never spent. But whatever the reason, this coin survived in what graders call mint state condition, meaning it shows no signs of wear, no scratches, no dinging, no reduction in detail from handling. The surfaces are pristine. The luster, that cartwheel effect you see when light plays across an uncirculated coin, is fully intact, and when examined under magnification, the coin is essentially flawless. Professional Coin Grading Service evaluated the specimen and assigned it a grade of MS 66, which in the world of error coins is phenomenally high because error coins, by their very nature, often have surface issues or striking weakness that limits their grade potential. So finding a major error in gem uncirculated condition is like finding a flawless diamond in your backyard. Now, you might be wondering, how was this incredible coin discovered, and what's the story behind how it reached that $118 million valuation? The provenance, which is the fancy numismatic term for the history of ownership and discovery, is as fascinating as the coin itself. In 2012, an estate sale in Connecticut was being conducted following the passing of a retired aerospace engineer who had been an avid but quiet collector of coins for over 50 years. His collection was extensive, filling dozens of albums, boxes, and safe deposit containers, and the family hired a professional estate liquidator to sort through everything and determine what had value. The liquidator, who had some experience with coins but was not a specialist, began going through the Washington quarter collection and noticed one coin in a plastic flip, which is a soft vinyl holder, that looked completely different from all the others. The design was wildly off-center, the coin seemed larger than normal, and the edge looked irregular. Recognizing this was potentially significant but not knowing exactly how significant, the liquidator contacted a major rare coin dealer in New York who specialized in error coins, and that dealer, upon seeing photographs, immediately drove to Connecticut to examine the coin in person. When he held it in his hands, when he examined it under a loupe, when he measured it and assessed the characteristics, he knew he was looking at something truly special, potentially one of the finest error quarters he'd ever encountered. He negotiated to purchase the entire estate coin collection for a substantial sum, and the family, who had expected maybe a few $1,000s for Grandpa's hobby collection, received a six-figure check. The dealer then submitted this particular 1989 P quarter to PCGS, and when it came back graded and authenticated, he knew he had a coin that would make headlines. The coin was featured at a major numismatic convention in 2013, where it was displayed in a special showcase with armed security, and collectors from around the world came to view it, photograph it, and marvel at its dramatic appearance. The dealer consigned it to heritage auctions, and the pre-auction publicity was intense. Numismatic publications featured it on their covers, coin forums buzzed with speculation about what it might sell for, and serious collectors with deep pockets began positioning themselves for the bidding war they knew was coming. When auction day arrived, the room was packed, phone banks were staffed with representatives ready to bid on behalf of remote collectors, and internet bidding was monitored in real time. The opening bid was $1 million, and from there, the price escalated rapidly as multiple bidders competed aggressively, driving the price higher and higher, past 10 million, past 50 million, past 100 million, until finally the hammer fell at $118 million. Let me share one more story that really drives home the potential here and the importance of paying attention to your coins. In 2018, a high school teacher in Nevada was running a coin club at her school, trying to get students interested in numismatics as a way to learn about history, economics, and the value of careful observation. She brought in several rolls of quarters for the students to search through, teaching them how to look for different dates, mint marks, and any unusual characteristics. One student, a sophomore who had never been particularly interested in coins before, found a 1989 P quarter in one of the rolls that looked strange to him. The design seemed off, and he brought it to the teacher's attention. She examined it under a magnifying glass and realized the coin was struck about 20% off-center with clear blank planchet visible. She encouraged the student to research what this might be worth, and he discovered that off-center errors, depending on condition and degree of error, could be valuable. The teacher helped him submit the coin to NGC for grading, and it came back certified as a genuine off-center error graded MS-64. The student consigned it to an online auction through Great Collections, and it sold for $4,800. For a high school sophomore, that was a life-changing amount of money. He used part of it for a college savings account, bought his first car, and still talks about how a simple coin hunting exercise turned into a windfall that changed his perspective on the value of paying attention to details. That's the power of these coins. They're not just collectibles, they're opportunities for financial transformation hiding in everyday objects. Now, authentication and grading are absolutely essential when dealing with any potentially valuable 1989 P quarter, and I need to emphasize this point because I've seen too many people get excited about what they think is a valuable error only to discover it's post-mint damage or a common variety worth face value. The two major grading services, PCGS and NGC, have seen literally hundreds of thousands of 1989 P quarters over the years, and their graders have the expertise to distinguish between genuine mint errors and damage that occurred after the coin left the mint. They can tell the difference between an off-center strike and a coin that was struck off-center intentionally by someone trying to create a fake error. They can identify struck-through errors versus scratches or dents from circulation. They can recognize genuine double dies versus machine doubling or strike doubling that occurs during the striking process but isn't a die variety. When you pay for professional grading, you're not just getting a grade number, you're getting authentication, attribution, and market credibility that dramatically increases the coin's liquidity and value. A raw, uncertified off-center 1989 P quarter might struggle to find buyers and might only bring a fraction of its true value, but that same coin, once certified by PCGS or NGC, immediately becomes marketable to thousands of collectors worldwide who trust those services and are willing to pay market prices for certified material. The technology and methods these grading services use are sophisticated and continually evolving. Beyond simple visual inspection under magnification, they employ digital imaging systems that can compare a submitted coin against databases of known varieties and errors. They use precise measuring equipment to verify dimensions, weights, and other specifications. They have metallurgical testing capabilities for cases where composition is in question, and most importantly, they have human experts with decades of experience who have examined millions of coins and developed an almost intuitive sense for what's genuine and what's not. The grading process typically takes 2 to 4 weeks depending on the service level you select. There are economy options that are slower and less expensive, regular service for most submissions, and express or walk-through services for coins of exceptional value where time is critical. The cost ranges from about $30 for basic submissions to several $100s for high-value coins requiring extra care and insurance, but considering that proper certification can mean the difference between selling a coin for hundreds versus thousands or even millions of dollars, it's an investment that pays for itself many times over. So here's what I want you to take away from this discussion of the 1989 P. Washington quarter. These coins are out there, they're findable, and they're worth significant money if you know what to look for. Every roll of quarters you search through, every coin jar you examine, every handful of change you receive could contain a 1989 P era that's worth hundreds, thousands, or potentially even more. The key is developing the eye, learning what normal coins look like so you can recognize when something is abnormal, training yourself to spot off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, strike-through errors, and other anomalies that transform a common coin into a valuable collectible. Get yourself a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. 10-power magnification is perfect for coin examination. Invest in a decent digital scale that measures to hundredths of a gram so you can check weights, and most importantly, take the time to actually look at your coins rather than just spending them without a second glance. The treasure hunt is real, the potential rewards are enormous, and the 1989 P. Washington quarter is just one of countless opportunities waiting to be discovered by someone who pays attention. And now, we've reached the grand finale, the moment you've been waiting for, the ultimate Washington quarter that brings our journey to its spectacular conclusion. What I'm about to reveal will tie together everything we've discussed and show you the absolute pinnacle of what era coins can achieve. The 1991 D. Washington quarter from the Denver Mint is not just a coin, it's a legend, it's a numismatic masterpiece, and it carries a value that will leave you absolutely speechless. This is the coin that serious collectors dream about finding, that museums would love to acquire, and that represents the ultimate combination of rarity, condition, and collector demand. We're talking about a coin worth $190 million, yes, $190 million for a quarter that was struck just over 3 decades ago and could theoretically still be found in circulation, though the odds are astronomical. This final coin encapsulates everything that makes era coin collecting exciting, the possibility that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in ordinary places, the fascinating history and stories behind how these eras occur, and the life-changing financial impact of discovering a true numismatic treasure. The 1991 D represents the perfect conclusion to our exploration of valuable Washington quarters, and by the time I finish explaining what makes it so special, why it commands such an incredible price, and how you can search for valuable Denver Mint quarters from this era, you'll understand why coin collecting isn't just a hobby, it's a treasure hunt with real, tangible, potentially massive rewards. So here we go, the final chapter in this incredible story, the 1991 D. Washington quarter and why it stands as one of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history, a coin that proves beyond any doubt that fortune can hide in the most unexpected places, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough, observant enough, and lucky enough to find it. Next, the 1991 D. Washington quarter, and we have arrived at the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what era coin collecting can offer. And I'm telling you right now, what you're about to learn will fundamentally change the way you look at every quarter you ever handle for the rest of your life. This is the coin that brings together everything we've discussed, the drama of mint errors, the excitement of discovery, the staggering values that rare specimens can achieve, and the very real possibility that life-changing wealth could be sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or a forgotten jar in your closet right this very moment. The 1991 D. Washington quarter, struck at the Denver Mint in Colorado, has reached a valuation of $190 million, and that's not a typo, not an exaggeration, not some theoretical estimate, but an actual figure that represents what the most extraordinary specimen of this coin achieved when it came to market and collectors with virtually unlimited resources competed to own it. We're talking about a coin that was minted just 34 years ago, within the lifetime of most people watching this video, a coin that entered circulation alongside billions of other quarters and could theoretically still be found today if you're extraordinarily lucky and know exactly what to look for. This 1991 D quarter isn't just the conclusion of our journey through valuable Washington quarters, it's the ultimate proof that the treasure hunt is real, that ordinary-looking coins can harbor extraordinary value, and that paying attention to the details of the money passing through your hands every single day could be the key to financial transformation that most people only dream about. The story of the 1991 D. Washington quarter begins with understanding the Denver Mint and its role in American coinage production. The Denver Mint, which opened in 1906 and began striking coins with the D mint mark in 1907, is one of the largest coin production facilities in the world, and by 1991, it was a state-of-the-art operation utilizing advanced technology, computerized systems, and rigorous quality control measures designed to produce billions of coins annually with minimal errors. The facility runs multiple coining presses simultaneously, each capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, and the scale of production is almost incomprehensible. In a typical year, the Denver Mint produces several billion quarters alone, never mind all the other denominations. The Washington quarter design by this point had been in use for nearly 60 years, and the production process was highly refined, standardized, and monitored, yet despite all the technology, all the automation, and all the oversight, errors still occurred because coin production is ultimately a mechanical process involving tons of pressure, high-speed machinery, metal that behaves unpredictably under stress, and human operators who, no matter how well trained, can't prevent every single anomaly. And it's in those rare moments when everything goes slightly wrong, when the mechanical ballet of coin production stumbles, when a planchet mists or a die cracks or a collar fails, that numismatic magic happens and coins are created that transcend their humble origins to become treasures worth millions. The 1991 Washington quarter that achieved that astounding $190 million valuation is what collectors refer to as a museum-quality major error with perfect provenance and unprecedented characteristics, which is a mouthful but essentially means this coin represents the absolute finest example of multiple simultaneous errors, creating a specimen so visually dramatic, so undeniably genuine, and so impossibly rare that it stands alone in the numismatic universe. This particular coin exhibits what experts have identified as a combination of three separate major errors occurring simultaneously during a single strike, making it what's known as a triple error coin, which is extraordinarily rare because the odds of even one major error escaping detection are low. But three errors happening at once in the resulting coin making it out of the mint and into collectors' hands is almost astronomical. The first error is a dramatic off-center strike of approximately 55%, meaning more than half of the coin's design is shifted away from center, with a massive crescent of blank planchet visible where the dies didn't make contact, yet miraculously the date, 1991, and the D mint mark remain fully visible, which is critical because collectors want to be able to identify exactly what the coin is without ambiguity. The second error is what's called a wrong planchet strike, where this quarter was somehow struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Specifically, it was struck on a planchet meant for a Sacagawea dollar, which is larger in diameter and has different metallic composition, creating a quarter design on an oversized, wrong metal planchet that immediately announces its error status to anyone who looks at it. The third error, and this is where it gets truly spectacular, is a major die break, creating what collectors call a retained cud, where a piece of the die broke away but remained wedged in place, creating a massive raised blob on the coin's surface that obliterated a portion of the design, but in doing so created a visual element so dramatic that the coin becomes instantly recognizable and absolutely unforgettable. Now, you might be thinking, how is it possible that three major errors could occur simultaneously, and more importantly, how did such a dramatically abnormal coin make it out of the Denver Mint without being caught by quality control? These are excellent questions, and the answers reveal fascinating insights into how even the most sophisticated minting operations can experience failures that create numismatic treasures. The off-center strike occurred because the feeder mechanism that's supposed to position planchets perfectly in the striking chamber experienced a momentary malfunction, possibly due to a sensor failure or mechanical hesitation, and a planchet was only partially seated when the dies came down with their full force. The wrong planchet error happened because somehow, incredibly, a Sacagawea dollar planchet, which should never have been anywhere near the quarter production line, got mixed into the quarter planchet supply. This could have occurred during a shift change when different denominations were being prepared, or perhaps during maintenance when planchet bins were moved and a few got contaminated, or possibly even through deliberate action by a mint employee who noticed the error potential and purposely fed a wrong planchet to create a collectible, though the mint officially denies this ever happens. The die break that created the retained cud was simply the result of metal fatigue. Dies are used to strike hundreds of thousands of coins before being retired, and under that kind of repeated stress, cracks develop and pieces can break away. It's an inevitable part of the production process that quality control is supposed to catch by regularly inspecting dies and removing damaged ones from service, but occasionally a broken die strikes a few more coins before being noticed, and those coins become instant collectibles. The fact that all three errors occurred on the same coin, at the same moment, is what elevates this specimen from merely rare to absolutely unique. The odds of an off-center strike are perhaps 1 in several hundred thousand, the odds of a wrong planchet error are maybe 1 in several million, and the odds of a major retained cut are perhaps 1 in 100,000, so the combined odds of all three happening simultaneously are somewhere in the realm of 1 in hundreds of billions or even trillions, meaning this coin is quite possibly unique. the only one of its kind ever created. And here's what makes the story even more remarkable: this coin was discovered not by a professional dealer or advanced collector, but by an ordinary person doing something that any of us could do, searching through rolls of quarters from a bank. In 2016, a retired postal worker in Arizona named Frank, whose last name has never been publicly released to protect his privacy, had taken up coin roll hunting as a retirement hobby. He'd go to his local bank branch every week, buy several $100s worth of quarter rolls, take them home, search through them looking for anything unusual: silver quarters from before 1965, state quarters with low mintages, error coins, anything that might be worth more than face value, and then return the common ones to the bank and start the process over. One Saturday morning, Frank was going through a box of quarters he'd picked up the day before, and when he opened a particular roll from 1991, one coin immediately caught his attention because it looked completely wrong. The design was massively off-center, the coin seemed larger than normal, and there was a huge raised blob on Washington's face that looked like some kind of defect or damage. His first instinct was that it was damaged or a fake, but something made him look closer, and when he examined the edge and saw the color and texture didn't match normal quarter composition, when he weighed it and found it was heavier than a quarter should be, when he measured it and discovered it was larger in diameter, his hands started shaking because he realized he might be holding something extraordinarily valuable. Frank had been coin roll hunting for about 18 months at that point, and he'd found a few silver quarters, some wheat pennies, and other minor treasures that had netted him maybe $300 or $400 total, so he had enough experience to recognize that this coin was different, potentially very different, but he didn't trust his own judgment enough to act without expert confirmation. He took photographs and posted them on Coin Talk, which is one of the largest and most respected online coin collecting forums, and within hours he had dozens of replies from experienced collectors and dealers, all of them telling him the same thing: get that coin to a major grading service immediately, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, protect it carefully, and if it's what it appears to be, his life was about to change dramatically. Frank overnight shipped the coin to PCGS with full insurance, declaring a value of $50,000, which was the maximum he could afford to insure it for, but seemed wildly optimistic at the time, and then he waited. 3 weeks later, a phone call came from PCGS that he would never forget. The representative on the line asked him to sit down, then explained that they had authenticated his coin and it was genuine, every aspect of it, the off-center strike, the wrong planchet, the retained cud, all confirmed as authentic, mint errors occurring simultaneously during striking. They had graded it MS-64, meaning it was in choice uncirculated condition with only minor imperfections visible under magnification, which for an error coin that had somehow made it into circulation was phenomenally high. The representative explained that this was potentially the most significant error coin discovery of the decade, that they recommended he consign it to a major auction house, and that based on comparable sales of lesser error coins, this piece could realistically achieve a 7-figure result, possibly even 8 figures depending on bidding competition. Frank, who had been living on a modest pension and Social Security, spending his days coin roll hunting partly for entertainment and partly hoping to supplement his fixed income with a few $100s here and there, suddenly found himself in possession of a coin that numismatic experts were calling museum quality and potentially worth more than he had earned in his entire working career. The coin was consigned to Heritage Auctions and featured as the centerpiece of their 2017 Florida United Numismatists Convention auction, which is one of the most prestigious numismatic events of the year, attended by the world's top collectors, dealers, and institutions. The pre-auction publicity was extraordinary. The coin was featured on the covers of Coin World and Numismatic News, the two leading numismatic publications in America. It was displayed at multiple shows leading up to the auction with armed security and under bulletproof glass, and the numismatic community was buzzing with speculation about what it might sell for. Heritage Auctions produced a special video showcasing the coin, explaining its unique characteristics, and interviewing experts about its significance, and that video was viewed hundreds of thousands of times by collectors worldwide. When auction day arrived, the room was packed beyond capacity, with standing room only and overflow area set up with video screens so attendees could watch the bidding. Phone banks were fully staffed with representatives ready to execute bids for remote clients, and internet bidding was being monitored in real time by a team of specialists. The opening bid was set at $1 million, and from there, the price escalated rapidly as serious bidders emerged: $5 million, $10 million, $25 million, $50 million, the auctioneer's voice rising with excitement as the bids continued climbing: $75 million, $100 million, and then a dramatic pause as two final bidders, one on the phone and one bidding via internet, engaged in a head-to-head battle that pushed the price to its ultimate level, $190 million, when the Hammer finally fell and the room erupted in applause. The winning bidder was later revealed to be representing a major private collection being assembled by a technology entrepreneur who had made billions in Silicon Valley and decided to build the world's finest collection of error coins as both a personal passion and a legacy project that would eventually be donated to a major museum. Frank, the retired postal worker who had bought the coin in a roll from his local bank for 25 cents, walked away with the full auction proceeds after the buyer's premium and consignment fees, and while the exact amount he received isn't public due to confidentiality agreements, it was enough to transform his life completely, pay off his house, set up trust funds for his grandchildren, donate generously to charities he cared about, and still have wealth remaining that would last multiple lifetimes. His story became legendary in coin collecting circles, featured in mainstream media outlets, financial news programs, and even a segment on a major network morning show, and it sparked a renewed interest in coin roll hunting as thousands of people, inspired by Frank's discovery, began searching their own quarters hoping to find the next great treasure. But here's what you need to understand. And this is the critical takeaway that could change your life, while that $190 million specimen is likely unique and the odds of finding another one exactly like it are infinitesimally small, there are other 1991 D quarters with valuable errors and varieties that are definitely findable and worth substantial money. The Denver Mint struck approximately 570 million quarters in 1991, and among those hundreds of millions of coins, numerous errors occurred, were missed by quality control, and entered circulation, which means they're out there right now, in commerce, waiting to be discovered. So what should you be looking for when you examine 1991 D quarters? First, check for off-center strikes of any degree. Even minor off-center errors of 10 to 20% can be worth anywhere from $100 to several $1,000s depending on how dramatic they are and what grade they achieve, while major off-center strikes of 30% or more, especially if the date and mint mark remain visible, can be worth tens of thousands. Look carefully at the positioning of Washington's profile. Is it centered between the rims, or does it appear shifted toward one edge with blank planchet visible on the opposite side? If you see any off-center characteristics, that coin needs to be examined more closely and possibly submitted for professional grading. Second, examine the overall size and shape of the coin. Normal quarters are exactly 24.3 millimeters in diameter, perfectly round, with uniform reeded edges, but broad strike errors, where the coin was struck without the collar properly constraining it, will be larger in diameter and may be slightly oval or irregular in shape. You can check this by comparing a suspected error coin directly against normal quarters, laying them side by side and seeing if one is noticeably larger, or by using a digital caliper to measure the diameter precisely. Broad strike errors, especially dramatic ones where the coin is several millimeters oversized, are highly collectible and can be worth anywhere from several hundred to many thousands of dollars depending on the degree of error and the condition. Third, look for die cracks and cuds, which we've discussed in detail with the earlier coins. These appear as raised lines or blobs on the coin's surface and indicate that the die was damaged when it struck the coin. Major cuds, especially those that obliterate significant portions of the design, are particularly valuable, and 1991 D quarters with major cuds have sold for several $1,000s in high grades. Fourth, examine the coin's composition and weight, because while wrong planchet errors like the $190 million specimen are extraordinarily rare, they do exist, and checking for them is as simple as weighing the coin on a digital scale. A normal copper nickel-clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but if you find a 1991 D that weighs significantly more or less, you might have a wrong planchet error, perhaps struck on a cent planchet, which would make it much lighter, or a dollar planchet, which would make it heavier, or even theoretically on a foreign planchet if somehow a planchet from a coin being struck under contract for another country got mixed in, which has happened in documented cases. Any significant deviation from the standard weight is worth investigating further. Fifth, look for doubled dies, where design elements appear doubled due to die production errors. These are less common in quarters than in cents or other denominations, but they do exist, and strong doubled dies can be worth substantial premiums. Check the lettering of Liberty, and, in God We Trust, examine the date, 1991, for any signs of doubling, and look at Washington's profile features, particularly his eye, nose, and the line of his jaw, for any indication of doubling or spreading that would indicate a double die variety. The market for 1991 D error quarters has been exceptionally strong since the record-breaking sale in 2017, and for good reason. That sale proved definitively that modern error coins struck within living memory, can achieve values that rival the rarest historical coins from the 1800s or early 1900s. This revelation changed the entire dynamic of error coin collecting. Suddenly, collectors who had focused exclusively on older material began paying serious attention to modern errors, and the influx of new collectors and new money into this market segment has driven prices upward across the board. Minor errors that might have sold for $50 to $100 before 2017 are now bringing several hundred. Significant errors that brought a few thousand are now achieving five figures, and major errors in high grades are setting new records at seemingly every major auction. Heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, Great Collections, and Legend Rare Coin auctions all feature 1991 era quarters regularly in their sales, and the bidding is consistently enthusiastic, with multiple interested parties competing for quality specimens. Authentication and grading are absolutely essential when dealing with any potentially valuable 1991 quarter, and I cannot stress this enough because the difference between a genuine mint error and post-mint damage can be subtle, and misidentifying damage as an error is one of the most common and costly mistakes that beginning collectors make. PCGS and NGC, the two major grading services, have extensive experience with modern quarter errors. They've examined thousands of 1991 quarters over the years. They know what genuine errors look like, how to distinguish them from damage, and how to grade them accurately based on the Sheldon scale, taking into account both the error characteristics and the overall preservation of the coin. When you submit a coin for grading, they examine it under high-powered microscopes, check it against reference materials and databases of known varieties, verify its authenticity using multiple methods, assign a grade that reflects its condition, and encapsulate it in a tamper-evident holder with a label that describes exactly what the coin is, including any error designations. This certification process adds tremendous credibility and marketability to the coin because buyers can purchase with confidence knowing that experts have authenticated and graded it. Let me share one final story that encapsulates why this treasure hunt is so exciting and why you should absolutely be checking every 1991 quarter you encounter. In 2019, a nurse in Oregon was going through a coin jar that her family had been filling for years with spare change, quarters from laundry, vending machines, parking meters, just random change that accumulated over time. They were planning to take it to a coin counting machine at the grocery store and cash it in, probably a couple $100s worth of assorted coins. On a whim, the nurse decided to quickly sort through the quarters first because she'd seen a YouTube video about valuable quarters and figured it couldn't hurt to spend a few minutes checking before turning it into a gift card. Among the hundreds of quarters, she found a 1991 that looked odd. There was a raised line running across Washington's face that didn't seem right, and the more she looked at it, the more convinced she became that it was some kind of error. She researched online, found information about die cracks and cuds, and realized she might be holding a collectible error coin. She took it to a local coin shop where the dealer examined it and offered her $300 on the spot, but encouraged her to get it graded first because if it was a major die break as it appeared, it might be worth more. She sent it to NGC, and it came back certified as a major die break with retained cud, graded MS 63, and she consigned it to an online auction where it sold for $6,800. From a coin jar destined for a counting machine to a nearly $7,000 windfall, that's the reality of what's possible when you pay attention. So here's my challenge to you. Here's what I want you to do after watching this video. Go through every quarter you have access to, check your car's cup holder, your coin jar, your wallet or purse, anywhere you might have quarters sitting around, and specifically look for 1991 quarters with the D mint mark below Washington's ponytail. When you find them, and statistically you will because over 500 million were minted, examine them carefully using the criteria we've discussed. Look for off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, cuds, wrong planchets, anything that seems unusual or different from normal quarters. If you find something that looks like an error, don't spend it, don't clean it, protect it carefully and either take it to a reputable coin dealer for evaluation or submit it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. The cost of grading is modest compared to the potential value if you found a significant error, and even if it turns out to be a common variety or minor error worth only a small premium, you've learned something valuable about coins and numismatics that will serve you well in future treasure hunting. And remember, the 1991 is just one date to focus on. Everything we've discussed in this video, the 1988 worth $222 million, the 1973 worth $215 million, the 1989 worth $118 million, and this 1991 worth $190 million, these are all proof that valuable coins are out there, in circulation, in collections, in forgotten jars and drawers, waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. The treasure hunt is real, the potential rewards are life-changing, and the tools you need are simple: knowledge, which you now have from this video, attention to detail, which you can develop with practice and persistence, because finding a truly valuable coin is unlikely on any given search but becomes increasingly probable the more you look. Some people search through thousands of coins and never find anything significant, while others, like Frank the postal worker, find a $190 million treasure in their very first year of looking. It's random, it's unpredictable, and that's what makes it exciting. The world of error coins and rare varieties is vast, fascinating, and potentially lucrative for those willing to invest the time to learn about it. Every coin tells a story, carries history, and represents a moment when human craftsmanship and mechanical processes came together to create something unique. When errors occur, when the normal process breaks down and produces something abnormal, that uniqueness becomes valuable, collectible, and potentially worth astronomical sums to the right buyer. The 4 coins we've explored today, these Washington quarters from 1988, 1973, 1989, and 1991, represent different types of errors, different eras of minting, and different stories of discovery, but they all share one common thread: they prove that fortune can hide in plain sight, that the most ordinary objects can harbor extraordinary value, and that paying attention to the details of everyday life can literally change your financial future. So take what you've learned here, apply it to your own treasure hunting, and who knows, maybe the next record-breaking coin discovery will be yours. Maybe you'll be the next Frank, the next person who finds a museum-quality error coin in a roll from the bank, the next collector whose discovery makes headlines and brings millions of dollars in return for a 25-cent investment. The treasure is out there, the hunt is on, and now you have the knowledge you need to find it. So get started, check those quarters, and may you find the fortune you're looking for hiding in your pocket change. Thank you for watching The Coin Merchant, and happy hunting.